Hi, this is Jesse Tribble, and today I'm talking about my impression of Stranger Things 2. So briefly, my thoughts on season 1. I thought season 1 was really good. I thought the thing that season 1 of Stranger Things got right was this perfect tone of what they were going for. It felt like a throwback to 80s movies in both reference and its own sort of plot and setting. My disappointment with the first season came from the premise of the show almost. When it was coming out, I thought that it was sort of like almost like a Twilight Zone kind of feel where, the title of the show is Stranger Things, so I thought, oh, maybe this is something where, this is a town where a lot of strange things happen. This is going to be a window into several different supernatural things happening in one podunk town. But overall, it seemed very basic, and that feeds into this season as well. They essentially have like one or two ideas. The one idea is the upside down universe, where you have, this portal to all these different monsters and creatures and all this different stuff that continues to somehow invade our world. And the other thing that they've done is to have these beings with superpowers, essentially. And that's kind of where 11 comes in and 8 comes in this season. The first season worked on its own because it was kind of this one story, this introduction to this upside down universe. It was an introduction to this telekinetic character 11. Going into season 2, I felt like a lot of the ideas were just rehashed. We were still dealing with this evil organization, kind of. We were still dealing with the upside down and kind of the aftermath of everything that happened in season 1. We were still dealing with 11 and her powers. I felt like this season repeated a lot of even basic things of last season, down to different like plot points and plot beats. There's a scene where they all go to this bus junkyard place. 11 shows up at the end and has to stop the Demogorgon type creature, There's a scene where they use like this convoluted map to try to find Will, and to me that felt reminiscent of the Christmas light scene. It became so iconic that this season had to repeat a lot of things from last season. There are some tweaks, and they upped the ante. The show felt like it wasn't really willing to push the boundaries because I felt like they were appealing to everything that people liked the last time. And that is kind of a double-edged sword because the things I liked about the first season, it wasn't very deep and it wasn't very intellectual and it wasn't very noteworthy. It was just a lot of fun. In this season, there are many places where they wanted to keep things the same, but they also changed some things that I thought were kind of to the detriment of this season. 11 is the iconic piece of this show. This badass shaved head girl in a pink dress with a jean jacket. Like that was kind of the image of the first season. Whereas now it's, it's obviously very natural. Okay, she grows her hair out, she wears different clothes. That totally makes sense, but it kind of ruins the show's aesthetic. Same with Dustin and his teeth. The actor has the genetic condition, and I don't know if this was something for the show or if it was something that he did personally. Which, if he wants to have teeth, that's totally on him. It's a very minor thing. It doesn't really matter at all. But the plot was very much the same, but there are also things that they changed that took out some of its unique stamp in the first place. Especially the villain this season, the shadow monster. I was actually really, really excited when I saw the teasers because it was this big ominous thing in the sky, I imagined it as this, premonition or this plague of this monster coming in and destroying sort of everything. And then it seemed like the shadow monster seemed more like this mastermind that manipulated these sort of Demogorgon dogs to do its bidding. The creators actually talked about it being a sentient being rather than like a monster from the first season. But if you're going to give this creature intelligence, then what does it really want? Why is it destroying the world? Why does it want to take over our world? To me, it wasn't really well thought out. It wasn't like Arrival, where you have these creatures or these aliens, and there's this effort to try to communicate with them or try to figure out why they're here. When you try to add intelligence to this monster, but you don't really give it the time or day, it just feels unnecessary. I also felt like the strength of the first season was the 3 tiers of characters. You had the adults, you had the teenagers, and you had the kids. I felt like the tone of every tier reflected the age of the characters. And there was this like unifying mystery of what happened to Will Byers. This kid has gone missing, and it's affected every tier of character. This season, they essentially shuffled a lot of the characters around in terms of their interactions. You know, this time you have Eleven with Hopper. Will is interacting with, you know, his mother and a lot of adults in the secret organization. The kids interact a lot with the teenagers, which works. You know, some of these cases work, but a lot of it feels like when the characters aren't really that deep, it's hard to really shuffle them around. And everyone also had their role in the first season that kind of made sense, and it made sense why they were in that story. Jonathan Byers was there because Will was his brother. The sheriff Hopper was there because he was the sheriff looking for the kid. Joyce was the mom. All the kids were Will's best friend. It felt like all the characters were involved in Will's life in some way. It made sense that they were thrust into this story. This season, I do feel like there were cases where characters really had nothing to do, or very little to do. Hopper's a character that is really boring. To me, he played a functional role in the first season because he was leading this investigation for Will. This season, it does start with him like investigating pumpkins or whatever. His role was more so of this as this father figure with Eleven, and I didn't really care for that dynamic. It felt forced, you know. They would go from 0 to 11 at the drop of a hat, which, you know, it's cool to see a telekinetic person having a temper tantrum, but it never really felt like there was a reason. The actual nature of the secret organization kind of confused me. This season, there was all these like debriefings, and Hopper was very familiar with the doctor character. Will was subjected to different tests and things like that. They sort of dropped the sinister aspect of the organization, and they turned into this more collaborative, lighthearted, or casual organization. I mean, they would just cut to like random scientists who looked like comedic-looking scientist characters. There was that element that was really weird to me, but Hopper still had this intense paranoia that they were going to kidnap Eleven and be this lab rat guinea pig thing. And those ideas conflicted with me. I was like, why is he so paranoid? Why is he so scared of what they're going to do to her when they seem to be a lot friendlier this season? That was strange enough in its own, but those two ideas together, they didn't really make sense to me. So him keeping her there seemed unnecessary, and so her like lashing out seemed kind of obvious. You know, it was all going to lead to her running away and exploring who she was anyway. I don't really have an alternative to that, but I do feel like Eleven works better with the kids. She was like E.T., you know, this kind of strange alien, and most of the time it feels like she was alone. And it also left Mike with nothing to do. Like, he did literally nothing this entire season. He moped and he sat around and waited for Elle, and then they reunited, and that was it. You know, that was all he did. And especially for Will, too, I was really impressed with the actor, Noah Schnapp, because, I mean, he was like crying and he was pitch perfect, and it was really impressive for a child actor. And I thought that was something interesting in this season because Will was missing like all of last season. I was thinking, how is that going to affect the group dynamic? You know, what are we going to see with his character this season? And I was really disappointed because he kind of became the MacGuffin of the season, just like last season. He was possessed by the shadow monster, and he stopped really becoming a character. And especially considering the talent of that young actor, I just thought it was a missed opportunity. However, I do think that there were a lot of really interesting new characters. I loved Sean Astin as Bob. You know, he felt like a very warm, familiar character. He had a lot of joy about him, and it felt like he fit this world. Though, of course, they kill him off, which, I mean, it was sad that happened, but it felt like a missed opportunity for me. Because once again, okay, now they're without a new character. His influence on other characters stops there too. Because I thought it was interesting, you know, that the Byers boys, they have to deal with this new father figure in their life, who's kind of a dork, but they like him though. Joyce has somebody who has stabilized her a bit. But so thinking about a third season, I have to wonder, well, okay, what are they going to do next time? Are they just going to reintroduce somebody else to be her boyfriend? It felt like there were things that they set up with him and with that character, and then they just cut it back so it ends exactly where the last season ends. It feels like a repeat. So Billy is a new character, and I kind of love him. He's ridiculous. He's over the top. It seems like every single scene he's in, there's like shredding guitar solos. I'm not sure if he's supposed to be an ironic character or a character that you're meant to take as this badass. I think there's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing going on, so I like that, and I enjoyed watching him in every single scene. So he was a really interesting addition to me. And Max was added, and I like the actress. She felt like a real person, somebody who used that sort of tough bravado, but underneath was still a little bit insecure or upset with her own life, or things like that. And weirdly enough, this season I really liked Steve Harrington. One, it felt like he understood the tone of the show. He felt like the perfect blend of comedy and drama, and his development as a character was really interesting to me. That idea of a bully trying to be a better person, trying to mature and find himself. A lot of times it was like negative reactions from me that gravitated towards other characters. Like, I really didn't like 11 this season. She didn't really have anything to do. She was cooped up in this cabin for a while, and she broke away to try to find her mom, and that didn't really lead anywhere. Other than it like led to other characters, but that didn't really lead anywhere either. That just redirected her back to the plot, which she was apart from the entire time. And I felt like if you have this E.T. character and you have this Elliot character, the interesting thing is not necessarily the E.T. character, it's the reaction from the kid who's there. And I get what they were trying to do. They were trying to expand on this person who was abused and locked up and experimented on and everything. And she's trying to grow, she's trying to find herself, and she's like learning more words and things like that. But it feels like taking a cartoon character and trying to give them depth. Dustin, I felt like made a lot of really stupid decisions this season. I think he was a fan favorite, and they propped him up. A lot of characters just had less to do. Jonathan was a character that I was interested in, but ultimately they didn't really know what to do with him. All he had to do was pine after Nancy. What was really interesting with the last season was Nancy got back together with Steve when he steps up. But this season they didn't. Jonathan really didn't have anything to do, and they wanted Nancy and Jonathan to get together anyway. They kind of just undid Steve and Nancy's relationship for no real reason. She got drunk at a party and told him off, and so then it fast forwards and transforms, and eventually Nancy and Jonathan get together, and it's like, oh, okay, that was very expected. What was the point of doing something subversive with her getting back together with Steve if they were just gonna undo it just to get together with Jonathan? Luckily they didn't spend a lot of time on that, but it did feel very predictable. That ended up being my overall disappointment with this season. It felt like the payoffs to all of the setups were exactly what you thought they would be. For instance, Mike is moping around the entire season. He's missing 11. 11 is doing the exact same thing for Mike. Both of these characters clearly want to see each other, and it's like, oh, what's going to happen? They see each other at the end, and that's it. They reunite. That was the payoff to all of their worries throughout the season. Max has to deal with her abusive older brother who, I'm thinking, okay, what's going to be the payoff to all of this? Is Billy going to take things too far? Is he going to hurt one of the kids? Max stands up to Billy and she says, leave me alone, and that's it. There's nothing else to it. I felt like the creators thought they were being deep by showing, insight into Billy's character. Oh, his dad's abusive. And it's like, yeah, totally makes sense. Which makes me feel like this should be a movie. It sort of implies that this is a movie. It's not Stranger Things season 2, it's Stranger Things 2, like it is a sequel or something. And, that's fine and all, but this still is TV. If you're going to give all of this room for 9 episodes, then there should be more layers to what's going on. These characters are really likable and you like watching them. But then they take the characters in a place where you think could be unexpected. The writing ends up relying on the stereotypes anyway. This is very clear in the episode where Eleven has her own episode, where she meets this gang of misfits, punks. It was embarrassing, especially because I've seen examples of punk characters in This Is England. You see punk characters in Green Room, and they still feel like real people. That entire dynamic didn't really make any sense to me. Initially, I thought they were all experiments in the secret organization. Only one of them was, and so you had this ragtag group of misfits. You had one guy who looked like he could have been in his 30s or 40s, hanging around with teenagers or children. That's kind of odd. So all of that was just kind of a nightmare, and I considered not watching it after that episode. But overall, I didn't hate it. There's a lot of characters that are really likable. They're fun to watch. They're different. You don't really find people that look like this in typical shows or especially popular shows. And there were a lot of moments that I really liked. Somehow Steve Harrington turned out to be the thing I liked the most about this season. So overall, I enjoyed it, but it was a disappointment, and I do feel like it was a step down from everything that happened in season 1 and kind of what made the show good in the first place. So that's my impression of season 2 of Stranger Things. It could change, it could stay the same, but what did you think of season 2 of Stranger Things? Let me know in the comments. I'll see you next time, and thanks for watching.